My op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com is titled, "When Will Americans Again Believe in America?" And after I share this with you, I'll get into, I'll take your phone calls here on Anything Goes Summer. But when will Americans again believe in America? And, you know, the headline doesn't really disclose what the article's about. But what the article's about is how Republican philosophy of basically that the only thing government should do is give tax cuts to billionaires and fund the military, that philosophy is destroying this country. That's kind of the bad news. And the good news is that the antithesis of that, the Democratic perspective, is starting to rebuild this country. Now, you know, we've got a lot of challenges. There's still a whole bunch of neoliberals in the Democratic Party and all that, you know, kind of stuff, and, you know, quack, quack, quack. But my article points out that philosophy matters, and philosophy turned into law matters a lot, particularly in this brave new world of climate change. We're you know, Jackson, Mississippi is coming to your town soon. Whether it's floods or fires, the climate is different now. We are living in a different atmosphere than the atmosphere that humans have been living in for the last couple 100,000 years. Or at least, actually more accurately, the last 5,000 to 10,000 years, since the agricultural revolution, since the end of the last ice age. We're living in a very different climate. And this is just the very leading edge of it. And we need to respond to this, you know, in a serious and full-throated way. This is, if there ever was a time to have government, you know, this idea of we the people, as it says in the preamble of the Constitution, who do things collectively to establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility and provide for the general welfare. If there was ever a time we needed that, it's when we're beset by crises. And climate change is a huge one. But what have Republicans been doing? The exact opposite. Here we have 9 of the 10 poorest states in the nation are red states, which should be no surprise. Republicans philosophically have been opposed to unions and the minimum wage since the 1930s. They will tell you. They believe people will only pull themselves up by their bootstraps when they're confronted with the alternative of terrible, grinding poverty. The exception to this, of course, is the children of rich people who must be allowed to inherit every last penny without any horrible death tax, right? I mean, their logic is so self-serving and so bizarre. You would think that Americans would just see through this, but you still have Republicans going, oh, death tax is a terrible thing, you know. So Texas privatized their electric grid, and what happened? Hundreds of people died in a blackout, and Texans were getting $10,000 electric bills. In 12 Republican-controlled states, people don't have access to Medicaid. You know, the Republican philosophy for low-wage workers, screw you, basically, is their philosophy. Red states have the lowest levels of high school and college graduation generally because, of course, Republicans don't think it's the job of government to educate people. In fact, red states, almost across the board, have the highest rates in the nation of, now get this list, listen carefully, spousal abuse, obesity, smoking, teen pregnancy, sexually transmitted diseases, abortion, bankruptcies and poverty, homicide and suicide, infant mortality, maternal mortality, forcible rape, robbery and aggravated assault, dropouts from high school, divorce, contaminated air and water, opiate addiction and deaths, unskilled workers, parasitic infections, income and wealth inequality, COVID deaths and unvaccinated people, federal subsidies to states, also known as red state welfare, people on welfare, child poverty, homelessness, spousal murder, unemployment, deaths from auto accidents, and people living on disability. And if you go to the article over at HartmannReport.com, you know, today, it's at the very top, you'll find every single one of those things that I just mentioned. There's a hot link to an article documenting my claim. Every single one of them. And it all comes back to philosophy. And it's not like it's a secret. Ronald Reagan told us this was the new Republican philosophy that he was going to embrace when he was sworn into office on January 20th, 1981, when he said, and I quote, "In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. From time to time, we've been tempted to believe that society has become too complex to be managed by self-rule. The government by an elite group is superior to government by, for, and of the people. Well, if no one among us is capable of governing himself, then who among us has the capacity to govern someone else? Question mark. End of quote. In other words, hey, if we can't take care of ourselves, how could we possibly run a government? So let's just do away with the government. This has been the Republican philosophy for 40 years. It's called neoliberalism. And sadly, it was bought into by Bill Clinton and to a smaller extent by Barack Obama, with the end of welfare as we know it and the end of the era of big government. Well, that experiment, that 40-year neoliberal experiment, has not only failed, but it is now ending. And who's ending it? The Democrats. Joe Biden and the Democratic Party have kind of woken up from this 40-year sleep and looked back and said, Franklin Roosevelt was right and Ronald Reagan was wrong. And we got to stop this following Ronald Reagan BS and just, and once again reclaim government as a public good, as a good thing, as an important thing. Thankfully, the Democratic Party has figured this out. But the bottom line is now we've got climate change coming after us. Before the last couple of years, and it's just gotten so obvious in the last 2 years, we had 116-degree summer last year here in Portland. It's going to be 124 degrees in California today. You've got, Jackson, Mississippi underwater because of an epic flood, Kentucky 2 weeks ago. It's just happening all over the country. Wildfires are going to be the new norm, and not just in the West. This drying out, the great drying out is happening across the Rocky Mountain states and the Midwest, and fires and things like this. So what we're seeing now, as a consequence of our changing climate, is that we can't afford this Republican philosophy anymore. Prior to the era of climate change, this whole Republican philosophy was something that, we could argue about, we could fight over. It screwed the students. We've got a student debt crisis. A lot of people don't have, in 12 Republican-controlled states, people don't have access to Medicaid. They don't have health insurance. There's, kids are not getting decent educations. We don't teach civics anymore. Quack, 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 right? Obviously, a lot of problems from the Republican philosophy. And prior to climate change, we could, bear that. We could endure it. But now we really have to pull together. Now we really need government. And we can't afford any longer a philosophy that says that government is a fundamental evil. We have to embrace government as a fundamental good and make it work that way. Republicans always try to sabotage government whenever they get control of it. Like Trump laying off 20% of the IRS and 20% of the Social Security Administration so that those agencies wouldn't work well. We can't afford to do that anymore.